full coverage of the SCO summit.
Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump states that he is unhappy but not surprised by Russian strikes on Kiev and has urged both sides to end the war. This all comes after the Kiev strike, which killed at least 17 people yesterday. The UN Security Council has approved the final extension for UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, with withdrawal scheduled for 2027. The vote comes amid pressure from Israel and the US. Israeli military targets Houthi rebels' positions near Sana'a in Yemen. The strike comes after Houthis launched missiles and drones against Israel and shipping routes as well. The United Nations has urged Iran and global powers to finalize a nuclear deal within 30 days in order to avoid new UN sanctions. UN spokesperson has called it a window for peace. Brazil's foreign ministry has ordered CAMEX to study using reciprocity law against US trade measures. The law allows countermeasures such as tariffs. The United States of America has ended tariff exemptions on small imported packages, raising fears of higher consumer prices. The Trump administration cites abuse of duty-free shipments. U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has criticized the CDC after the chief's removal, calling for an overhaul. He claims that the agency failed during COVID-19 and has questioned its past public health claims. U.S. President Donald Trump will address the United Nations General Assembly in New York on the 23rd of September, marking the first speech of his second term. Well, viewers, those were the headlines and our top focus. U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed unhappiness but not surprise over Russia's recent deadly strikes on Kiev. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said that Donald Trump recognizes that these two countries have been at war for a long time. Listen in to what she said.
He was not happy about this news, but he was also not surprised. These are two countries that have been at war for a very long time. Russia launched this attack on Kyiv, and likewise, Ukraine recently dealt a blow to Russia's oil refineries. They have taken out, as a matter of fact, 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity over the course of their attacks throughout the month of August. So the president is continuing to watch this intently, and this killing, unfortunately, will continue as long as the war continues, which is why the president wants it to end. And that's why he's worked harder than anyone to end this war.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the attack, calling it one of the largest Russian strikes on Kiev in months, and has urged Western allies to send a strong joint signal to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The assault killed at least 19 people, including 4 children. Listen in to what Zelensky has said.
Цей удар абсолютно чітко демонструє, що російські цілі дійсно не змінилися. Вони хочуть воювати, б'ють не тільки по наших людях, не тільки по наших містах, наших громадах. Росія зараз завдає ударів по всім у світі, хто прагне миру. Це удар по Україні, це удар по Європі. Також це удар Росії по президенту Трампу, по інших глобальних.
All right, there you've seen it, viewers, how Zelensky has reacted to the tragic strike that has taken place in Kiev. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Professor Jim Rice. He's a professor of international law, joining us live from the Philippines. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. The war does not seem to abate, even though the Trump administration is trying to make sure that all parties come to the negotiating table in the first place. We've recently seen reactions also come in from Europe. Merz, the German chancellor, has stated that it is obvious that a Putin-Zelensky meet will not happen. Do you concur?
Oh, yeah. I've said this before in a broadcast earlier, I think last week. I very much doubt that Putin will meet with Zelensky either in a bilateral or a trilateral session, basically because Putin has no intention of negotiating in good faith, none whatsoever. So it seems that Trump can talk all he wants, and he can continue to both sides this issue, but there is no both siding of this issue. This is an illegal war that was perpetrated by Putin on democratic Ukraine, and it's completely unjustified, and there's no point in negotiations, in my view. The only way that Putin will stop fighting is if he comes to the realization that he can't win this war.
And speaking of both siding this issue, we've just heard Caroline Leavitt speak earlier as well. She spoke of the strikes in Kiev, but at the same time, she also highlighted that Ukraine targeted energy infrastructure in Russia. What do you make of the rhetoric, the kind of language that the Trump administration is using?
It's outrageous. First of all, attacking industrial infrastructure is not prohibited under international law. However, targeting civilians is. So either Leavitt, who basically is beginning to sound like someone from North Korea at this point, is either mistaken or she's trying to deceive the public.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us as we track further updates from across the world. We're shifting focus to what's exactly transpiring as far as the Middle East is concerned. The United Nations Security Council unanimously approved a final extension of the UN interim force in Lebanon. The French-drafted resolution was passed after a US-backed compromise extends the UNIFIL's mandate until 31st December 2026. It then calls for a one-year orderly and safe drawdown and withdrawal in coordination with the Lebanese government, transferring full security control in southern Lebanon to the Lebanese armed forces. Israel, a long-time critic of the UNIFIL, has welcomed the decision. Ambassador Danny Danon has called it good news, claiming the mission failed to prevent Hezbollah's dominance in southern Lebanon and has urged now the Lebanese government to assume full responsibility. The United States, which pushed for a firm end date, warned that it would not support any further renewals. Listen in to what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Dorothy Sher, had to say.
The United States notes that the first I in UNIFIL stands for interim. The time has come for UNIFIL's mission to end. This is the last time we will support an extension of UNIFIL. The security environment in Lebanon is radically different than just 1 year ago, creating the space for Lebanon to assume greater responsibility. We commend the Lebanese armed forces' deployment progress since the cessation of hostilities went into effect, and we will continue to work with the LAF to expand its capabilities as Lebanon carries out its critical work in disarming.
Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam has welcomed the extension, thanking France and its allies while reaffirming calls for Israel to withdraw from occupied positions along the border. Let's in fact listen in what Lebanon's ambassador to the UN, Ahmed Arafa, has said.
بما عليهم من مسؤولية قانونية ردع إسرائيل عن انتهاكها للسيادة اللبنانية وإعاقتها مسيرة إعادة بناء الدولة كما تراها الحكومة اللبنانية والشعب اللبناني، كما نصت عليه الفقرتين العاملتين الثالثة والرابعة من هذا القرار، والانسحاب الفوري والكامل وغير المشروط من كافة الأراضي اللبنانية المحتلة ومن ضمنها المواقع الخمس الحدودية، ورفع ما يسمى بالمناطق العازلة والإفراج العاجل وغير المشروط عن جميع الأسرى اللبنانيين. ثالثاً، على الدول الضامنة لترتيبات وقف الأعمال العدائية الوفاء بالتزاماتها في هذا الإطار وإلزام إسرائيل باحترامه كامل.
Global reactions, meanwhile, are mixed. France has praised the compromise, Britain has cautioned against withdrawal without full risk assessment, and China has criticized the United States for pushing an inflexible timeline despite ongoing regional tensions. With nearly 10,800 peacekeepers deployed, the UNIFIL has been one of the UN's longest-running missions up until date. Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Jim Rice. Thank you for waiting rather patiently as we heard what exactly the UN has done, what the US has reacted, and how exactly Lebanon has also welcomed this move, especially by the proposal that was floated by France. It's been 47 years since the UNIFIL had come into force, and Israel, meanwhile, has long claimed that it could not curb the activities of Hezbollah, the terror that Hezbollah would wage against Israel. What do you make of this deadline now being set, as well as US's inflexibility in shifting it further from 31st December 2026?
Well, I think your intro was excellent. Peacekeeping and peacekeepers are always in a difficult position. This has been a long and protracted mission. Going forward, I hope that the other parties, including the United States, will lend their greater support to the Lebanese themselves in order to keep the peace. I would also hope that Israel would refrain from its constant attacks across the border.
The US at large is looking at establishing an economic corridor in the region, especially between Israel and Lebanon, who've been at odds for a very long period of time. They're hoping that with this move, as well as potential disarmament of the Hezbollah, that's something that they're trying to do in the near future, that this economic corridor could in fact catalyze. Do you see this happening in the near future?
I can't really say. Obviously, increased economic ties and trading and other aspects are a good thing. In the present atmosphere of the ongoing Gaza conflict, though, I find it hard to see this happening, certainly in the near term.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for taking out time, sitting with us live on NewsX World today morning. You are shifting focus to more developments. We're now learning that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has confirmed that talks are underway that are aimed at demilitarizing southern Syria, marking the first time Israel has acknowledged contact with Syria's new regime. He's highlighted what the focus of the discussions would be. Listen in.
אנחנו מתמקדים כרגע בשלושה דברים. בהגנה על העדה הדרוזית במחוז סואדה, לא רק שם, ביצירת אזור מפורז מרמת הגולן, דרומית לדמשק, עד מחוז וכולל מחוז סואדה, ביצירת מסדרון הומניטרי שיאפשר לנו להביא סיוע, מזור, חומרי בנייה, מזון, כל מה שנדרש. עזרה רפואית בהיקף גדול. הדיונים האלה מתנהלים כרגע.
You've heard what exactly Netanyahu has had to say. He said that Israel is looking at protecting the interests of the Druze community, create a demilitarized zone as well. Meanwhile, this follows deadly sectarian clashes in Syria last month. With us on the broadcast this morning is Ms. Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting statement coming in from Benjamin Netanyahu. He's spoken and confirmed that the Israeli regime is now in contact with the Syrian regime. We know that both countries have been at loggerheads for years at end, and we've seen recent strikes take place in Syria as well. But despite that, Netanyahu has stated that he's looking at establishing a humanitarian corridor, a demilitarized zone, and protecting the interests of the Druze community in Syria. What do you make of his statements?
Well, it's kind of strange if he's asking for all of this after supporting al-Julani, now renamed as al-Shara, and being placed there with a handshake and a thump on the back by Trump on the Syrian throne. And this particular move was applauded by Israel because it supported its objective of having the Assad regime, which was influenced by Russian and Iranian forces. So he was very happy at that particular time that the al-Shara regime has taken over Syria, and he hoped that it would be, influence peace in the region. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, we've had Israel bombing and occupying the southern parts, the Golan Heights and all of those places. The minute Assad regime left, it has gone back exactly where it was. It has violated the buffer zone. It has gone back, captured those particular places. It has, of course, worked for protection of the Druze community, but that is not the only community that is being facing a lot of terror at the hands of men in uniform under the command of HTS, which was exactly the rebel force, and I'm putting air quotes here when I say rebel force, that was led by al-Shara al-Julani, whatever you want to call him at today, on today's date. So these people have killed Christians, they've killed the Alawites, they are doing a massacre of the Druze community, and this is known to the world, and this is exactly what we cautioned when all the analysts across the world had cautioned, when Trump went thumping the back and calling him a big, strong, handsome leader. So, this is quite normal that that they have had to walk in as a military force and come with guns to protect people that al-Shara or the HTS does not permit. In an unconfirmed report, I believe Israel has also done air raids near Damascus last night, and that would basically mean that they are trying to control the Iranian militia that was situated near the outskirts, about 6 kilometers outskirts of the Damascus region. So when he says he's looking for talks, he's actually looking to ensure that his particular interests, Israel's particular security interests in the region are met. But I do not know how successful he's going to be in that until and unless he gets to put guns at the border and gets to control it via the power of the barrel. Otherwise, any kind of peace is only going to be on paper, as long as the minute Israel is going to withdraw, this particular terrorist regime placed by US for its own interest and Israel's protection is not going to protect the people that are not completely Sunni Islam.
All right, ma'am, stay on with us. We have some other news coming in. We're now learning that the United Nations has called on Iran and major powers to take advantage of a 30-day window to strike a nuclear deal before the UN reimposes sanctions on Tehran in a move triggered by Europe. We are now learning that Stephanie Dujarric, the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, has stated that this period will provide an opportunity to avoid further escalation and find a peaceful way forward. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Russia's UN Deputy Envoy Dmitry Polyansky has now responded to European powers' move, stating that it had absolutely no legal bearing. Let's in fact listen in to some other statements he made on the issue.
I will say that this move by European countries, in our view, has absolutely no legal bearing, because they were not implementing Resolution 2231 in good faith. For example, they did nothing in terms of lifting sanctions against Iran during the so-called transition day 2 years ago. They are acting absolutely in breach of JCPOA in each and every sense and letter and spirit of this document. So we do not think that this move by these three countries should entail any action from the Council. This is our very strong and principled conviction. Of course, it will affect the overall climate over the issues related to Iranian nuclear program.
All right, still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Das Gupta. We've heard it from the Russian spokesperson. He's of course stated that what the E3 is doing, what the European powers are doing, they have absolutely no legal bearing. We did see, in fact, strikes take place against Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran had threatened to pull out of the NPT earlier, but somehow negotiations and talks are still taking place with European powers. However, they're seeming to break down. Do you think Iran will accept this ultimatum that has now been given by the UN?
Iran is divided into two factions, one of which wants to accept the deal that has been placed on the table for them, where they will have, increased access to the world trade, they will have other access to the modern world. But there is another faction that does not want to bow down to any of the ultimatums and threats that are pushed on it via sanctions or via the war that had just happened, the 12-day war that had just happened. So Iran on its own is divided into two parts. But I also understand that it is right now being supported by China and Russia very, very well. They have in fact floated a resolution to extend the timeline of this particular window till April 2026. And in that particular draft that they have floated, they have asked for the E3 to be out of any of the negotiation and the peacekeeping part of the Iran and its nuclear program. Iran has, of course, given access to one site to IAEA in the nuclear deal that has happened. This is Bushehr. They have given access to them where nuclear refueling is, I think, about to happen soon. So Iran is trying to comply, but not trying to bow down. When this 30-minute window and a timeline, something like this, is placed in front of it, it faces a kind of a ticking clock, and where they are being pushed to a corner to how to deal with issues regarding their national security as well as the world's security itself. Now, if I look beyond this, the first sunset clause of the JCPOA that is supposed to expire in October is going to come through, and where they are basically trying to push through that. If they manage it, they get access to a large amount of reserves that has been frozen. They get to do a part of the trade. So the Iranian regime is trying to buy time till the time that particular clause comes into play. And the UN, of course, is asking the European nations to try and accelerate the process of getting to a particular nuclear deal that will enable the world to feel safer. Otherwise, the 45 times breached limit, and I'm repeating that number, the enriched uranium breached the limit that was set by JCPOA was 45 times. So that particular amount is scary for anybody. If Iran gets access to its reserves, gets to sell oil, gets to trade with the world, it might get access to develop a nuclear weapon on the side while it was under sanctions and the JCPOA. So it's a very double-edged sword. While we do want Iran to adhere to the norms of the world and not go into nuclear proliferation and trigger a worldwide panic as well as arms race, we also do not know whether the European nations have enough say or power to ensure that Iran comes to the talking table on their terms. They can put those sanctions, but the nuclear proliferation still occurred while those sanctions were in place.
Indeed, ma'am. I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking more developments from the Middle East. We're now learning that Palestinians in Gaza City are fleeing towards the southern Gaza Strip as Israel presses on in its offensive. The United Nations now estimates that nearly 1 million people currently live in the Gaza Governorate, which includes Gaza City and its surrounding areas in the north as well. Let's in fact listen in to what some of the Palestinians had to say on being.
النزوح في حد ذاته جريمة كبرى غير جريمة القتل. النزوح يعني تشريد في الشارع، يعني هاي أكبر دليل إنه إحنا قاعدين في الشارع العام تحت القذائف. النزوح في حد ذاته جريمة كبرى غير جريمة القتل. النزوح يعني تشريد في الشارع، يعني هاي أكبر دليل إنه إحنا قاعدين في الشارع العام تحت القذائف وتحت.
You've just heard a Palestinian narrate his ordeal of being displaced from his home. Meanwhile, Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich has now called on the government to begin annexing parts of the Gaza Strip if Hamas refuses to lay down its weapons. Let's listen in to what he said at a press conference in Jerusalem.
ועכשיו אנחנו בעצם מתחילים לגבות מחמאס מחיר טעות או התבצרות בטעות ככל שנמשכת המלחמה וחמאס לא נכנע ולא משיב את החטופים. אגב, בעיניי זה מנוף הלחץ הגדול ביותר על חמאס לכניעה ולהשבת כל החטופים. כל שבוע שחולף שחמאס גורר אותנו למלחמה ולא נכנע, אנחנו מספחים עוד שטח מהרצועה. תראו איך זה נראה קודם, סוגרים מים, סוגרים חשמל, סוגרים הכל. בשלב הזה, אחרי שהעברנו גם את כולם לדרום למורג, יש רק מחבלי חמאס בכל יתר הרצועה, שכמו שאמרתי, או ייכנעו או ימותו ברעב ובצמא. הדבר הזה חוקי לחלוטין, לגיטימי לחלוטין, שוב מדובר במחבלי חמאס ורק בהם.
Meanwhile, Smotrich also urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to adopt his plan in full and instruct the Israeli Defense Forces to implement it, stating that Hamas must be militarily defeated and economically suffocated to achieve complete victory in the Gaza Strip by the year's end. Still with us on the broadcast is Shruti Das Gupta, international affairs expert from New Delhi. We've heard the Israeli finance minister now calling for the annexation of the Gaza Strip in its entirety. Israel claims that its goal is to ensure the purge of Hamas. But we've seen in recent days a lot of pressure, whether internationally or even at the domestic front, where the families of hostages are now coming out against Netanyahu's offensive, stating that the lives of the hostages will be in further danger as well. Do you think Netanyahu will buckle to the pressure, or will he continue his offensive?
In my particular opinion, the offensive is not going to stop, because that has been at the core of Netanyahu's war with Gaza, that Hamas needs to go. They have tried before the optics of placing the hostage interests ahead of the Hamas attack, but it doesn't really come through on ground. Every time Israel attacks, every forced stoppage of aid or restriction of access to outside bodies to Gaza is done by Israel. They are condemning the, now I think about 18 odd left alive hostages, and of the total 50 that are supposed to be under Hamas. Hamas on its own, of course, is not going to stop. It is their entire mouse trap that they have laid out. They have helped that the cheese in this ugly mouse trap are the hostages and their bodies. By doing this, they are creating unrest inside Israel, forcing Netanyahu and his regime, which is the coalition government, to face public pressure, and the opposition is gaining voice when they say that we want the hostages back. But on the other side, the right-wingers that are completely in support of Netanyahu are urging Israel to continue its offensive. And I believe Smotrich also said that a complete takeover of Gaza is possible within 3 to 4 months if every week, if the deadline is met and the Hamas does not surrender, give over hostages, they take on a new slice of the Gazan city. So this is completely not going to stop. It is going to continue. It is going to happen. And Hamas, of course, are in the tunnels and in an urban warfare phenomena where you cannot distinguish who is a Hamas operative and who is a Gazan citizen. They are winning the narrative war, and they're forcing Israel to invest more deeply into this war, politically as well as militarily.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us live this morning, sharing your analysis of what is going on in the Middle East. Meanwhile, viewers, shifting focus further east, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Tokyo for a 2-day official visit to Japan, from 29th to 30th August. Now, during his stay, he will attend the 15th India-Japan Annual Summit and meet Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. The visit comes amid cooling India-US relations over President Trump's trade policies. Now, on the very first day, talks are expected to see Japan pledge to double investment in India, with agreements likely to cover trade, defense, investment and technology, including AI and semiconductors as well. Indian Prime Minister Modi will also meet Japanese industrialists and political leaders. Meanwhile, on the second day, he and Prime Minister Ishiba may travel to Sendai by a high-speed train to visit a semiconductor facility. All right, viewers, this is all we have time for. More news and updates on the other side as we wrap up this bulletin.